This talk is on SOPA, the Stop Online Piracy Act, and PIPA, which protects Intellectual Property Act, both of which are violently opposed by especially my constituency, let's say, which is citizen journalists that are online. So I'm going to very briefly tell you what's in this document that will affect us so harmfully. Let's see here now. In my view, it creates an existential threat to citizen journalism by censoring online activity. And only Ron Paul of the Republican candidates oppose it. And we'll see what happens with Obama. He always likes to play it both ways, as he did in NDAA, where you permanent right to a right to permanently detain U.S. citizens without a lawyer or trial on suspicions of association. So we want to look at who benefits, who wrote this legislation, get at that part. So that will be in part two in a detail. In part one, we can just say the top media companies can be convicted of attempting to grossly manipulate American public opinion. So this is where citizen journalism comes in. I initially read the newspapers and watched the media, and with the advent of certain online sites and the advent of YouTube, we could start finding out that they were omitting pieces of information. You might still support the American official line, whether you call it the media line or the White House line or the corporate line, but there tends you'll find by these critical piece of information being omitted that it warps and distorts reality. So in the case of Libya, for example, Hillary Clinton kept saying he should stop killing his own people, and we tried talks, and we didn't try talks, and we ended up killing almost 100 times more people through the war than had been killed in the initial uprisings. That was omitted. Many other things about Libya were omitted. Libya had the highest standard of living in Africa. That was omitted. Enormous amounts of information were omitted. So where that brings us to is the only reason I was able to learn these things was through citizen journalists, effectively, people that were unpaid. So the digital rights acts that are being proposed could easily shut down all of these outlets. The two worst parts is hyperlinking to infringing sites and the death of open source software. I did 3 videos about the new branch of the military called U.S. Cyber Command. And you should look at those. Those are on the site Free Radio SF Libya Research, but I will post them to Jeffersonian Alliance as well. And this SOPA and PIPA would achieve many of Cyber Command's objectives, which are to gain tactical and strategic control of online information. Now, their goal is during wartime, but if we're in a war on terror, we're in wartime now. Of course, we aren't in a real war, but they've manipulated it so they get all the money of fighting a real war. Crack down on our civil liberties far worse than any real war. So this, if you look into Cyber Command, would achieve many of its cold-blooded and creepy objectives, if abused, shall we say, which we can assume they will be. These media companies are owned by investment groups involved in the military-industrial complex. And also in my research, many of the groups that own CBS, NBC, ABC, CNN, and Fox were founded by Jewish people. And I have read the Torah, and I can write Hebrew. And I have a tremendous love of Judaism and its history, but we have to call it for what it is. And many Jewish people, especially the most powerful in the United States and the richest, support a major U.S. commitment to Israel. And the way the U.S. is implementing this commitment to Israel, by being forward deployed all over the Middle East, will eventually lead to our military defeat, because during an economic race with right now 17 other countries, we will contract. There's no question about it, from having the majority of the world's economy in Western Europe and the US and Japan, to that being concentrated in Brazil, Russia, India, China, Indonesia, Turkey, and Indonesia, Turkey, and Mexico. And they will have the preponderance of the resources. So we need to be building our economy, not our military, in peacetime. And Israel needs to defend itself. Basically, while we are in an economic race, and all of our measurable metrics are falling behind in this race. See, we have the highest poverty rate we've had in 40 years, so that's going to drive up incarceration costs. It's going to drive up medical costs. It's going to reduce our competitiveness because we have a less effective population. It's going to increase the burden on the government for servicing this poverty class. So we need to get rid of this poverty class. And the best way to do that from a non-partisan point of view is to free up more money to be invested in the economy and not in wasteful, non-productive activities such as the military. The military, to get a job out of the military is about 10 times expensive as to get one in the private sector, and a job in the private sector creates another job in the private sector according to capitalism, where the job in the military has a reduced impact, although we do end up with this military-industrial complex, which puts no food on the table and educates no one. So I want to speak to you about the provisions of SOPA and PIPA and what their impact would be on us. The Electronic Frontier Foundation has an excellent site about this. So first of all, over the weekend, the Obama administration issued a potentially game-changing statement on the blacklist bill saying it would oppose PIPA and SOPA as written. Yet the fight is still far from over. Even though the New York Times reported the White House statement all but kills current versions, the Senate is still poised to bring PIPA to the floor next week. We can expect SOPA proponents in the House to try to review the legislation unless they get the message that these initiatives must stop. And they're not going to stop. These major media companies want to get rid of alternate points of view because, first of all, it'll drive more viewership to them. And second of all, it will perpetuate their domination of our society. And I can prove this by looking at the Ron Paul campaign and the Libya intervention, where the news media damn well knew they were omitting information or slanting information and did it anyway. And not one company, but all of them in lockstep, literally down to using the same phrases on a given day, such as a day where all the wacky stuff about Ron Paul is released, even though he was the most accurate in predicting financial bubbles in the United States. He's the only person who's strongly taken a stand against the war on terror, against the Patriot Act. And this is supposedly wacky. And to return us to a sound money economy, because the inflationary printing of money is entirely to the benefit of these large corporate power structures. So at any rate, the first provision is the Anti-Circumvention Provision, which allows them, in addition to going after websites allegedly directly involved in copyright infringement, a proposal in SOPA will allow the government to target sites that simply provide information that could help users get around the bill's censorship mechanisms. This would silence much of the open source software community. Venture capitalists have said they would stop investing. Facebook and YouTube would could be blocked entirely if there's any copyright infringing material. Let's see here. Let's see. Anyone who writes or distributes VPN, virtual private network, proxy, privacy, or anonymization software would be negatively infected. This includes organizations that are funded by the State Department to create circumvention software to help democratic activists get around authoritarian regimes' online censorship mechanisms. Ironically, SOPA would not only institute the same practices as these regimes, but would essentially outlaw the tools used by activists to circumvent censorship in countries like Iran and China. Second, there's the vigilante provision, which essentially would grant broad immunity to all service providers if they overblock innocent users or block sites voluntarily with no judicial oversight at all. You see, a service provider can go ahead on, as long as they're acting in good faith, block any site they want to. So that means that, for example, Comcast could block YouTube. Comcast could block the television streaming networks. Even if those weren't infringing, as long as they were acting in good faith and based their decision on credible evidence, they received total immunity. As we noted months ago, this provision would allow the Motion Picture Association and the Recording Industry Association, MPAA and RIAA, to create literal blacklists of sites they want censored. Intermediaries will find themselves under pressure to act to avoid court orders, creating a vehicle for corporations to censor sites, even those in the U.S. without any legal oversight. And as public knowledge has pointed out, not only can this provision be used for bogus copyright claims that are protected by fair use, but large corporations can take advantage of it to stamp out emerging competitors and skirt antitrust laws. And I'm talking about the emerging competitor of the truth, as told by citizen journalists, the things that the corporatist media, which is owned by a very small group of people, and I am honing in on them. I'm doing the research. It's in my last video. It's showing the 5 or 6 investment firms that own BlackRock Investment, FMC. You can look there, and I'm going to have more on it. I'm going after these people. With this provision, then a corporate right of action, allowing them to essentially shut down full sites instead of removing the infringing software. Expanded Attorney General powers. PIPA and SOPA would also give the Attorney General new authority to block domain name services, a provision that has been universally criticized by both Internet security experts and First Amendment scholars. Even the Blacklist Bill's authors are now publicly second-guessing that scary provision. The Attorney General would also be empowered to delist websites from search engines, which, as Google Chairman Eric Schmidt noted, would still criminalize linking in the fundamental structure of the Internet itself. And this is a really serious problem, is that if you hyperlink to a web page, and let's say at the time there's no infringing content on it, then infringing content comes on that, you can be held liable for that hyperlink itself and have your site shut down. And these are just some of the egregious provisions in PIPA and SOPA that drastically change the way we use the Internet for the worse and punish millions of innocent users who have never even thought about copyright infringement. As Reddit co-founder Alexis Ohanian explained, PIPA and SOPA are the equivalent of being angry and trying to take action against Ford just because a Mustang was used in a bank robbery. My name is Alexander Hagan. Good day and good luck.